Okay, good morning. We're going to continue on our Praying with Fire book number 2. And the caption over here says preservation, but let's see what it says. Foreseeing the long treacherous road, the Jewish people would be forced to travel through the ages. The prophet Habakkuk advised the future generations of the one asset they would need to strive for the journey. Yeah, Habakkuk was one of the last prophets that we had. He saw that we're going to be in a long exile. So he said, you need to grab onto one thing. He says, a righteous person will live because of his emunah. He says, if a person doesn't have emunah, he's not going to be able to survive. So therefore, you need this emunah. You need to develop your emunah in order for you to be able to survive the long journey that's going to be not easy. The altar from Kelm explains that since Habakkuk was among the last of the prophets, his was the guidance that would have to take the Jewish people through to the end of time. Wow. Meaning he gave us this guidance for the rest of our time in the Galut. Yeah? So the most important factor, he said, was what? Emunah. The following well-known story confirms that indeed Emunah and the Shema Israel that declares it has the power to preserve our people against all the forces of destruction. He says this concept of Emunah, and through the Shema Israel, which is our belief in this Emunah, in one Hashem, he says this will keep us for not eternity, but for the long exile that we're going to be in. And he says this following story, which is a true story, is going to explain to us how this concept it works. He says in May 1945, Rabbi Eliezer Silver from the United States and Diane Grunfeld from England were sent to serve as chaplains during the liberation of some of the Nazi death camps. Yeah, after the death camps of Nazi Germany, there were children that were in the churches. They gave these children as, for protection, and the children were growing there. While there, they were told that many Jewish children had been placed in monasteries in Alsace-Lorraine, I guess in France or wherever that was. The rabbis went to claim them. They went to take these children out of there. The priest at the monastery demanded certain documentation that he would need to release the children. He said, okay, no problem. We're going to give you all the kids. Give us documents, who's who, who's what, and we'll give them to you. He asserted that there was no other way to ascertain which children belong to who and which children are Jewish. The documentation was impossible to obtain because there was chaotic times over there. What documentation? Everything was burned, everything was destroyed. There was no documentation. But the rabbis had another idea. They asked if they could return that evening when the children were being put to bed. The priest reluctantly agreed. They said, you know what, we want to come tomorrow when there's going to be bedtime at night. The priest said, okay, come. That evening, as the children were being put to sleep, the rabbis walked among the rows of beds, calling Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So the children, when they heard this, all those from Europe, they started crying, Mami, Mami, Tati, Tati, with the words their moms had spoken at their bedsides. The Jewish hearts of these children swiftly rose past the priest's indoctrination to reclaim their true identities. Yeah? He said the children heard the Shema Israel and they remember how their mothers used to do Shema Israel at the bedtime. And they started crying out, Mami, Mami, Tati, Tati. The prophet Habakkuk foresaw that the fulfillment of the Torah and therefore our survival would depend on Emunah. Meaning, in order for us to survive, number one, we have to abide by the Torah. And number two, we have to have the emunah that Hashem will one day redeem us. Rav Gedalia Shor explains, the main principle in exile is emunah. As alluded to in the verse, it says, quote, to declare in the morning your kindness and your faith at night. Rashi clarifies that at night means exile. Here, this pasuk. In fact, as we are tossed and shaken by today's harsh winds, our primary focus must be to cling to Emunah more tightly than ever. As the Midrash states, in the merit of Emunah, our nation was redeemed from Egypt, and in the merit of Emunah, our nation in the future will be redeemed. Thus, as the Rambam says, there is nothing one can teach or learn that is more fundamental than Emunah. Yeah? Says this was expressed eloquently by Rav Yecheskel Levenstein in correspondence regarding the curriculum for his students. Our Rambam says that the main factor The most thing you should teach is emunah. And then you teach halakha and so on and so forth, because without emunah, the other one's not going to grasp it. He says, Rav Levenstein says like this, our first job in enlightening the students must be interest in the meaning and purpose of Kriyat Shema and Tefillah, because without that, there is no Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim, which means acceptance of the yoke of heaven, and no Tefillah. Who can measure the magnitude of the merit that will accrue to us if we will have the privilege to enlighten the eyes of students in strengthening Emunah? I think that one thing we're lacking in our yeshivas is this fact that we don't teach Emunah to our children. We start with the Gemara, we start with Lacha, we start with that, and then they come out of school and they're like, Hashem? Who says Hashem exists? Meaning they have these questions. So he says, years ago, that you have to teach the children Emunah before you teach them anything else. So points to ponder.
They don't say no Hashem. They say we can work Hashem the other way.
Yeah. Habakkuk stated, a righteous person will live because of his emunah. This provides the guidance that would carry the Jewish people through the end of history. And number two, emunah and the words of Shema have the power to preserve the Jewish people's tie to Hashem and His Torah despite any adversity. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen. Amen.